You truly need to found a business with a unique opportunity, high growth, where you have differentiating technology and you have accelerating traction.
Welcome everyone to UpTech Report. I'm very excited for my guest here is joining me, Simon Yencken, who in our first part, we talked about his product, Fanplayr, which is behavioral personalization for website and e-commerce. Definitely check it out. It's fascinating, this space, how it's moving, both on, we talked about the personalization, but yes, also privacy and the balance between the two. But this time in our founder's journey, I'm excited to hear more about your story, Simon. Can you take us back 7 years to the beginning of Fanplayr, and then before that even, how did you get to where you are today?
It's been a fun career. I went to university at Monash University in Australia and did law, and I also did a Bachelor of Science in Mathematics. So I always had that interest in business and science. I started my career in law. I was 15 years, 10 as a partner at the international law firm Herbert Smith Freehills, and I was actually recruited by a client who was then CEO of Reuters, which is now since was acquired by Thomson Reuters, but in those days was a very large news and tech company headquartered in London, and he offered me the position of general counsel there. And it was funny because I actually had decided to move to London from Australia, and 3 of the large London law firms had offered me a position. And then I had this offer from a client, Reuters, saying, did you want to be general counsel? And so, often people in large law firms in those days, it was a pretty elite legal career. And general counsel at a major company didn't really have the same ring to it in those days. So I remember actually Reuters kept improving their offer to me, because I initially said, I'm really flattered, but no, I think I'll go to this other law firm. They kept getting better. And I had lunch with one of my former partners in Melbourne. And I said, Tony, I don't know what to do. I've got these 3 law firm offers. I really want to go to this firm in London. It was actually Clifford Chance. And but then I said, Reuters offered me this. What do you think? And he said, Simon, if you don't take the Reuters offer, I will. So I ended up at Reuters, and I was immediately thrust into the business side of things, and that really their business was heavily technology. News was their heritage, but in those days it was all about technology, data feeds, and I actually was working very closely with one of the executive directors who was in charge of the tech side of the business. And one day he said to me, oh, Simon, can you come with the deputy finance director and we're getting the Concorde to New York. We want to negotiate an acquisition. And I said, yeah, sure. And we literally got the Concorde in, flew in that evening, went straight to the hotel, straight to a private meeting room, and negotiated an acquisition of this company. It was then called Technicron Software Systems, and later changed its name to TIBCO. And in the meeting was the CEO, CFO, and a banker. In those days, he was at Alex Brown. And literally at that dinner, we negotiated the deal. Later, we brought the lawyers in and they produced acquisition documents this big. But that was when my TIBCO journey started. And then 3 years later, and it's hard probably for current listeners to even imagine this, but in 1996, which is the year, the internet was just taking off, and it wasn't really, people weren't really sure how much of it was actually going to be a thing. And the CEO of TIBCO came to Reuters and said, I really think we should IPO this company. And Reuters actually didn't want to do that because they'd bought a product which was really positioned around how can you actually best display data in a bank dealing room. And so I worked with the CEO, the CFO of TIBCO, worked out a way of splitting the technology between two companies. TIBCO Software was created as a new company. Reuters kept the product they originally bought, and that journey started. And then the CEO said, actually, Simon, I'd like you to join the board of directors. So I did. And 3 years later, the company was IPO'd on NASDAQ. Reuters kept what they bought. And at the peak of the market, that company was worth $30 billion, all around the opportunity that TIBCO created and saw around the birth of the internet infrastructure. And having done that startup, well, it wasn't really a startup. Having worked in that tech company and being part of that IPO, from then on, really, my career was in the tech world, not in the legal world anymore.
That was the transition point.
That was the transition point. And I did a startup called Nextset Software, which ended up being sold to Razor Risk Technologies. And Razor Risk is still a risk management service, particularly for exchanges and banks. And that company was public, but it was acquired in the end by TMX, which is the Canadian Stock Exchange. And then I went from there. I did a lot of work with Yencken, where I was, as I mentioned before, on the board for 10 years. I invested in the first round in 2000, helped Yencken raise a late stage round in 2008, just before the GFC, just before Lehman's went down. And we got 8 term sheets and ended up raising a round from Francisco Partners in San Francisco. We raised 57 million. And the CEO said, Simon, would you like to join the board? I joined the board. 3 years later, he said, would you like to be chairman temporarily? So I was chairman for 3 years. And then we ended up taking the company public in Australia in 2014 and sold to Oracle a couple of years ago for $1.2 billion US. So during the Yencken journey, my co-founders and I, we founded Fanplayr. And the name, people often ask me, why are you called Fanplayr? And it doesn't make sense. Or do you provide gaming software? What's the story? And that actually relates to the genesis of the company, because when we started Fanplayr, we saw the opportunity being in e-commerce around the use of data, but we actually started offering gamification as part of the service, and hence the name Fanplayr. And we did that for quite a while. We actually quickly signed up about 1,500 SMBs using that service, but we started to analyze the data, and we found actually that the gamification made absolutely no difference.
The underlying purpose of it wasn't doing anything.
It made no difference. So we pivoted to personalization, but based on the data, based on user behavior. And a few years later, after we made the pivot, I started to talk to my fellow executives to say, look, we really should change the name of the company. What about this name? And I even actually the company bought an alternative domain name segmentation.com, because I'd mentioned in the earlier interview how segmentation is key to our service.
Yeah.
And so I was talking to our fellow executives and founders. Look, I'd really like to change the name to segmentation.com. What do you think? And they said, no, we love Fanplayr. So we just kept the name. It's quite funny.
Oh, wow. So the original purpose of the name no longer there, but it's just inherently it's enjoyed and loved it internally. Wow. Well, how long until you made that pivot, that transition?
We were into it, I think, about a year before we made the pivot.
Gotcha.
So I think
it's a lot of it. It's powerful to look at your own insight and not be afraid to look at the data and say, well, we could keep going. No, we got to change something.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
you made the change. Now, this is the first company that you have first founded. You've led a lot of leadership in several companies, but this is the first one that you've founded?
I was a co-founder of Nexat, which Rajiv was actually head of product at Nexat. Rajiv is a co-founder, CTO at Fanplayr. But we had also some other co-founders who ran and set up dev centers in India. But Fanplayr, we set up also with Derek Edelman, who's a co-founder. And we had an earlier co-founder who left after the first probably couple of years, Mark Schreiber, he was more focused around the marketing side. But it's been an exciting journey, and part of any startup journey is always you're focused on fundraising, and I'm probably one of the world's experts on fundraising, I would say, having spoken to numerous venture capital firms and other investors. But we've now got to the point with Fanplayr where we're actually profitable. We pre-COVID, we were expanding in a revenue sense at 100% year on year. It's probably now averaging between 50 and 70% growth, but it's still growing strongly, and we're doing that profitably. And we've been able to expand geographically just through working with personal contacts and people that are experienced in the different regions. So we now have offices in the US, Palo Alto, New York, and then in Europe in Milan, London, Manchester. We have an affiliate based in Paris. And then we have an office in Mexico City, Buenos Aires. We're about to open an office in Brazil. We have a big office in Japan and Melbourne, Australia. I think that's it.
With your expertise in funding itself, can I ask what are the biggest mistakes one could make when seeking funding?
I think most founders don't have much idea about what investors are really looking for. And so you need to have a unique product in a growth market where you have achieved product market fit. And I think in this day and age, investors have got more demanding, and what is expected now in a Series A round, which is basically you're generating revenue and you seem to have a good trajectory. Previously, I think 10 years ago, you could have started a company and raised a Series A round based on a PowerPoint and some good co-founders.
And that's not the case.
Not anymore. So I think it's not, it seems mysterious and elusive to many founders. What is it that investors are looking for? But you truly need to found a business with a unique opportunity, high growth, where you have differentiating technology and you have accelerating traction. If you don't have those things, you're going to have a lot of trouble getting funding. And then investors are looking also for a founders team that have the right skill set to get the company to the next level. And so I often get approached by people asking advice. Say they can be alumni, fellow alumni, or even family members in extended families saying, I have this great idea, what do you think? And honestly, one of the most common things people lack is the right co-founders. So you can't found a company if you don't have the right talent in your team, and you can't be successful in raising funding. So
finding the right co-founders are essential.
Well, for example, in the tech field, if you don't have the CTO that's writing the code himself, designing the product, designing the architecture, but you're planning to outsource that, I'd say you've got no chance of getting funding, because you have to have that skill in-house. You need to have somebody, if you're building a product in fintech or in ad tech or travel, whatever the vertical where you're building your startup, you have to have domain experience. If you haven't got it, you need a co-founder with that experience. And then you need differentiated product market fit. You need to have really good customers and demonstrated traction.
Powerful insight right there. Before you even get funding is the those main pieces. Once you have and you start to build the team, obviously hiring the right people after that is essential too. When it comes to building a team, have you seen are common mistakes when it comes to hiring?
I think one of the most common mistakes is overhiring, building too big a team, and running out of cash.
That's a good one. That's a good one.
It happens so often. And if you actually think about any startup, one of the most valuable things that you have is capital. You have your own personal capital, and you have capital that investors give you. And the more you spend of investors' capital, the harder it is for the employees and founders to make a return, because the investors want to get paid back first. So if you raise a lot of money, which on the face, people applaud you for that, you get big write-up in TechCrunch or any publications, that's amazing. But actually, the more you raise, the higher the hurdle you've got if you want to get any return for the founders. So really, your question was around hiring. I think a big mistake is to hire too many people and burn your cash, burn your capital too quickly, because then you're actually making it harder for founders and employees to get a return. And you can never assume that there'll be another capital round.
That's a great way to look at it. To give us some frame of reference, how many people did you start off with, and how many people do you have today?
So we started off with 3 people, literally in a room in Plug and Play Tech Center in University Avenue, Palo Alto. And we now have more than 50 people globally. It's expanding every week. But the good thing is that we only hire people if we know we can do that and keep growing profitably. So it's a pretty exciting story. And we've only literally this year, in the last few months, set up the UK office. We've got an amazing business there already. 3 people who are incredible. Yeah, look, it's exciting when you do it off your own endeavors, and you're not doing it purely by spending other people's money. And we have a great culture in Fanplayr where it's a really close team. And because the way we had expanded organically, the first expansion really was to Europe and then Japan. Both happened organically. People approaching us and saying, hey, I can sell this in Japan. Sure, go ahead. Hey, Simon, we actually had a TechCrunch article written about us when we launched. This guy I'd never heard of before, Enrico Coroni, contacted me and said, hey, Simon, I think I can sell this in Italy. And sure enough, he could. We now have a massive office there, all based on hard work and sales and business. So it's actually all that expansion has been organics. We know everyone knows each other. We work together very closely. And I decided several years ago that in order to be really effective as a team, we should actually get together annually. We typically have done it in January in person and agree on the strategy. And we did it twice in Italy. And the first time it was like really cheap hotel, cheap conference room, no air. It was a tough first conference to get really good alignment of the company and the key executives around, hey, what's our mission? What's our vision? But we did that. And then the next one was again in Italy. This time we went a bit in Milan, and then we went like for 2 days to like a small little ski town. But again, we had the alignment, but then it was, all right, what's our strategy for the next year? What are our goals and objectives? This January, luckily we got it in pre-COVID. We're so lucky. We went to Japan. We got this incredible business in Japan, and we invited, obviously it was, primarily to agree on our strategy for product, for engineering, for sales, for marketing. But we also invited our customers in Japan to come along. Wow. And they presented to us, and we said, hey, we'd like you to tell us a bit about your company, how you use Fanplayr, what results you've seen, and what would you like from Fanplayr in the future? And so I was staggered. We had a room in hotel conference room, large room, packed full of executives from our clients. And they're all large companies in Japan, like really large public companies. And they got up and showed their slides about their business, how they use Fanplayr, what results they have. And honestly, it's best summed up by one of the executives and one of our clients in Tokyo. And he said, these were the results that we saw. My problem was that no one in the company believed me. They were too good. And so it was such a great experience to actually get the team together, to be aligned on strategy, get our customers together. And then the last question was, what would you like to see out of Fanplayr? So I was really asking for that because we, although we had designed the product to display on site in multi-languages, the actual portal, the administration was all in English. And so what did they ask for? They said, we'd really like Fanplayr to be in Japanese characters. And yeah, that was like a big thing. So sure enough, just after the conference, what did the engineering team deliver? Internationalized version of our service. You can now go and you can choose like 10 different languages, click a button, everything's rendered in Portuguese, Spanish, Japanese, Italian, anything you want. So just getting people together really around, it's part of our culture, but bringing in the clients to tell us what are we doing right? What are we doing wrong? What do you want? Hearing that message, it's great.
That's powerful. I've heard of getting customer insight, but I've never actually heard inviting your customers to your yearly internal conference.
Yeah, no,
that's a great strategy. Last question I have for you, Simon. Looking forward, overall, technology itself, what kind of tech innovations do you predict we will see in the near term, the next year or so, and long term, the next 5-10 years from now?
That's a very hard question to answer. And I think if I had the crystal ball, I could make a fortune on the stock market. But one thing I will say is that if you think back to the dot-com bubble and the bubble bursting, well, tech fell right out of favor. But I never felt that tech wasn't the biggest opportunity ever from a business standpoint. The bubble notwithstanding. And look what's happened in the journey with Amazon and more recently Tesla, Google, or Alphabet, Apple. That belief I had is certainly proven to be true. And I think in answer to your specific question, we're going to see more innovation and more growth in technology. It's going to become more and more key to all business. And I think in particular, we're going to see much more use of artificial intelligence in driving that technology in all applications and all verticals. And some people say it's scary. And I know Elon Musk famously has been quoted to say, it could be terrible machines, running the world, but I'm more optimistic and think it's actually a good thing, and it will lead to a better experience in tech and a better experience for all people.
Agreed with you on that. Simon, I appreciate you sharing your love of the future and technology, this journey that you've been on, and the insights you shared, and some good tips and suggestions, especially when it comes to funding and hiring. Thank you for your time, Simon.
Thank you, Alexander. It's been a pleasure.
Everyone, again, thanks for joining us on UpTech Report, our founder's journey. Definitely check out part 1 if you haven't seen it, with Simon hearing more about Fanplayr. Our sponsor for today's episode is Terraleap. If your company wants to learn how to better leverage the power of video to increase sales and marketing results, head over to terraleap.io and learn about the new product customer stories. Thanks again, everyone, and we'll see you guys next time.
Thanks a lot, Alex.
Have you seen a company using AI, machine learning, or other technology to transform the way we live, work, and do business? Go to uptechreport.com and let us know.